Okay, so we are recording. I want to welcome everyone to this CPD entitled How Architectural Technologists Can Shape Health and Well-Being. We have a speaker with us today, Anne Vanner. Welcome, Anne. My name is Tim. Tim Fraser is my full name. I'm the publications executive at CIAT, which means I co-edit the AT journal amongst other things, like doing a lot of our press and things like that. So welcome. This is a very exciting event. Anne's already said that she thinks she could talk about this topic for hours and hours. So it'll be a good one, I think. It's good to have a passionate speaker. So without further ado, are you ready to get started, Anne?
Well, my little button that says shared is grayed out. Why is that? It says only meeting organisers can do that.
I will just change that setting for you. Give me 1 second. Sec. Is it still grayed out now, Anne?
No, it's not.
Fantastic. So when you're ready.
Thank you. Right. Can you see that now?
Yeah, I'm not seeing it yet, Anne. Do you want to give it another go?
Share. Here's what I want to share. I want to share that. Can you see that now? I can't hear anybody. Can you see that?
No, we can't see anything.
I wouldn't know what the ownership of them is or
Right.
anything like that. Let's see.
There we go. I can see something now, Anne.
Can you see my presentation?
Yep.
Yes.
Fab. Excellent. Right, let's make a start. Good afternoon, everybody. Let's move on to the... So, as I've said, my name's Anne Vanner, and I'm an architectural technologist, and a Living Futures accredited professional. And I'm also a recovering academic, having left teaching 2 years ago now. I believe that, let's get to that one. So I believe that buildings, but specifically homes, should be joyful, waste nothing. They should generate their own power, cost nothing to run, only take what they need from their surroundings and heal themselves. They should also make those who live or work within them healthier, more focused, and more connected to themselves, to others, and to the world around them. And I say that because we're in a housing crisis. And a few years ago, I did a talk which was a little bit provocative in its title, which was, "Is your home trying to kill you?" But the talk focused on the hidden risks within the homes, whether that's damp, poor material selection, design choices, that are quietly harming us. And for me, it was a wake-up call, and it started me on this sort of path, which has led to this little sort of project called Healing Buildings.
Stop.
Going back to my sort of slightly academic background, when I put this presentation together, I had to make sure that there was a learning journey that was going to happen within this CPD. So I put some learning outcomes together. But basically, hopefully by the end of it, you'll understand that the role of the architectural technologist is really important in promoting health and well-being. So how ATs influence the physical, mental and emotional health of building occupants through the technical design decisions, the material choices and performance coordination. I like to think, so the second one is applying sort of this idea of thinking about the people, the place and the planet framework. So trying to keep those three things in balance as we are sort of designing, specifying, so that we have this holistic lens that considers the human needs, the contextual sensitivity and the environmental impact. And start to think about the tools that you might need to create sort of healthier buildings. Now that could be biophilic design processes, regenerative thinking, ensuring about sort of inclusive detailing that really puts the architectural technologists at the front of this conversation. But I'd like to start off with this image, a poorly sick plant, and the sort of discussion around, if you saw a plant that was struggling, you probably wouldn't blame the plant, point your finger at the plant and go, why aren't you doing something? You'd look at its environment. How much sunlight is it getting? Have you watered it enough? What's the soil like? And you'd make some changes to those and hope the plant would start to come alive, lose its dead leaves and start to thrive. So why don't we do the same? We have, and what I'm saying here is that we have the power as architectural technologists to design the environments to help people thrive. And a few weeks ago when I was sort of messing around on social media, I saw this post which just really resonated with me. And it says, don't forget to drink water and to get some sun. You're basically a houseplant with more complicated emotions. And that's what I'm sort of saying, that what I'm talking about isn't actually that complicated. We just need to really focus on those sorts of things. And why is this so important? I mean, I've got some key statistics here, but I mean, there is so much research on this in terms of the issues that we are facing. So poor housing costs the NHS over 1.4 billion per year. 2.2 million homes in the UK or in England have a category 1 hazard, and that's under the housing health and safety rating. That could include cold, damp, mold. Children in cold homes are twice as likely to suffer from respiratory problems. And only 13% of UK adults say that their homes help their mental health. Shouldn't it be the other way around, that only 13% of people say their home isn't helping their mental health? And that could include everything from space issues, acoustic problems, or simply just not having a space to do your homework at, a space to go and sit and eat at. So the built environment can either heal or harm us. And as architectural technologists, we're at the forefront of trying to sort this out. So I'll go back to that people, place and planet. If we use this lens when we talk about things today and think about the decisions we need to make, we can start holding this all in balance. And this is a drawing that some students of mine did a few years ago when we were having this conversation around where do we as architectural technologists have the impact? And we started sort of with the body in terms of thinking about the person. We need to make sure that we are designing spaces that are ergonomical, that are safe, that do what they are required to do. But we also then started thinking about how we might design for the senses. So thinking about how we design for our ears, our eyes, sense of touch, for our noses. I'm not advocating that we go around sort of licking buildings, but certainly sort of thinking about sort of our noses being able to smell damp and things like that. We then sort of expanded out from that. So thinking about sort of the intimate spaces, private spaces, social spaces and public spaces. So thinking about sort of how from the detail we move out towards sort of nature, but then also for going back into sort of how we design also then for the minds, thinking about how people age, all the people with sort of neurodivergent issues as well. So how we think about sort of us as the people we are designing for, but how that then connects inwards to us and ourselves, and then outwards to the sort of wider environment. So I've just put 5 key ways that architectural technologists, I think, can shape health and well-being. I've only got 35 minutes, and as I was sort of saying in my email this morning, I could talk about this for 35 hours, possibly even 35 weeks. And these are the ones that I suppose I get a bit more sort of excited about, but there are plenty of others. It could be through acoustic design, thermal comfort, safety, but I think these 5 that we're going to talk about give us a powerful foundation to create the spaces that genuinely care for the people that we are designing for. And the first one is thinking about the materials. The materials we specify directly affect occupants' health, whether that's the VOCs in paints, to formaldehyde in particulate boards, toxic materials that can lead to chronic illnesses, moisture absorbent surfaces that can harbour mould. So as architectural technologists, we must be vigilant. We must choose materials that not just perform or for a performance or for budget, but for safety and long-term impact. And we can think about this along the whole sort of spectrum. From a construction point, the research from the Considerate Construction Scheme found that over 50% of site managers are now increasingly being asked to consider the health impacts of materials by their clients. We're still sending a lot of construction waste to landfill. Now that has a broader impact on the environment and community health. So again, we're thinking about sort of that larger scale. From a homeowner's point of view, 26% of UK residents reported health issues that they believe were linked to conditions inside their home. That includes mould, chemical smells, or poorly ventilated areas. And this little diagram that I've used shows the sort of the complexity of the building materials over the millennium, where we started off with organic materials, so wood, stone, cellulose, minerals and ceramics, and how sort of between or from the First World War onwards, there's been this chemical revolution, petroleum-based polymers, synthetic chemicals, and volatile solvents, to nowadays when we're also talking about the impact that flame retardants, pesticides, and nanoparticulates have on us. And we don't really understand this chemical cocktail. And the more that we are super insulating our building, the more that these materials that are within the building are going to have an impact on us as individuals. There's a wonderful little statistics that basically says if you get to the age of 80, you have spent 72 years inside. I know we can get very excited about what happens externally, but the internal environment has such a huge impact on our health and well-being. And as we are putting more and more stuff into those buildings and not allowing for the sort of the natural or passive ventilation, that's causing us more and more problems. The second one is thinking about daylight and something called the circadian rhythm. So daylight governs our biological rhythms. Poor lighting affects sleep, mood, and cognitive functions. Natural daylight strategies, how we can control glare, how we can use intelligent lighting systems, can support well-being. We have the tools and the knowledge to design for lighting that heals. This isn't just about sort of aesthetics, this is about sort of biology. The research shows that students in a classroom with more daylight progress up to 20% faster in maths and reading. In offices, access to natural light is one of the most requested workplace features, and workers in daylight-rich environments report an 84% drop in eye strain and headaches. And from a home environment perspective, the survey showed that 74% of UK residents consider natural daylight essential for their mental well-being. Yet despite that, many of the UK homes fall short due to orientation issues, poor window placement, the lack of a glazing strategy, sill heights that are in the wrong place, and all of that. So as architectural technologists, we can directly influence this. From window placement, aperture size, glazing types, we have the ability, and I would argue the responsibility, to prioritise light as a foundation of health. The third one, this is probably my favourite, but I couldn't put it first because I get very excited about this, is this concept of biophilia. Now this is this idea that we have as humans an innate and genetically determined love for the natural environment, and this is felt universally by mankind. I don't think there's one person who would sort of say they didn't feel better if they'd gone out for a walk, sat in the sunshine, looked out of a window. We are part of nature. We over the sort of the last millennium have disconnected ourselves from nature. And that causes our body all sorts of stresses, i.e. our built environment has evolved a lot quicker than we have as a human race. So we are designed to see horizontal planes better than vertical planes. So we're designed to live in savanna areas, so horizontal lines. Vertical lines, like in the built environment, cause us stress and anxiety. The idea of sort of biophilia is this idea that we could reintroduce nature or natural elements back into the built environment. It could be as simple as, instead of having a plastic top table, a wooden table, bringing plants into the building, having flowing water, thinking about natural airflow, the ability to open a window to be able to feel the breeze on your skin. All these features reduce stress, lower blood pressure, and improve cognitive performance. And as technologists, we can embed these ideas early on through detailing, specification, and spatial thinking. Again, some more statistics for you. The view of greenery can improve recovery rates in hospitals by up to 8%. And this is a very old piece of research that goes back to sort of 1984, but where sort of some of these ideas started to come from. Patients who had their gallbladder removed, those that were recovering on a ward that had a view of a garden, needed less pain relief, and they were discharged from hospital about 2 to 3 days earlier than those that had the same kind of operation, the same sort of hospital sort of treatment, but their ward looked out onto sort of a concreted area. And the researchers back then sort of went, I wonder if it has to be nature itself or whether it could be an image. So they ran the experiment again, and they realized that you could have the same effect if you had pictures of nature. So it's not always about bringing actual nature into a building. Occasionally it's about being able to replicate nature. Employees in an office with natural elements reported 15% higher well-being and 6% more productivity. Children in classrooms with natural light and views perform up to 25% better on tests. And then if we think about that thing about what I just said, about 90% of our time is spent indoors, yet exposure to natural elements can reduce stress, heart rate, and blood pressure. Despite the evidence though, many buildings remain sterile, disconnected from nature. And this is where we as architectural technologists can lead again. Thinking about specifying natural materials, integrating green walls or courtyards, aligning views to greenery, detailing spaces to encourage movement and calmness. So biophilia isn't an aesthetic bonus, it's a health imperative. And it should be embedded in the bones of every project and not just sprinkled on top of it. The fourth one we're going to consider is the idea of inclusivity and user-first design. Buildings should work for everybody, whether that's neurodivergent users to people with physical disabilities. Our spaces must support dignity, comfort, and access. That means thinking about sensory loads, which goes back to that image right at the beginning, where we got students started to think about how do we design for senses, movement patterns, signage and control system. Universal design isn't a luxury, it is actually our responsibility. When I used to teach students, when we started talking about sort of usability, used to start thinking about sort of the physical. And I suppose that's where it came from, sort of part M, thinking about how people move around a building. But actually that whole idea has grown so much. And this little diagram, again, shows that sort of the physical side of things, the ability to reach things. So thinking about people of size, dexterity, I'll come on to that in window design in a moment. Flexibility, so how people can change their environment themselves, what works for them, so a bit of agency. Strength, doors with door openers that for people with lower upper body strength can actually use, and then just mobility, actually how we move through buildings. But also thinking about the senses, so sight, you know, the field of view, contrast, colour, hearing, what's detectable, what's not detectable, anxiety, touch, this idea of touch, what are we touching, when are we touching a building, what does that feel like for us? And that's not just sort of in our fingertips, it's the surfaces that we walk over. Smells, whether that can be a cue for something or can be discrimination, preferences for something or against something. And again, taste and smell are often sort of quite interchangeable, but clues about sort of eating and what preferences. But then also the cognitive, realizing that we are dealing with an aging population. So thinking about memory, problem solving, recognition, attention to details, and how we communicate with people. The fifth one is then thinking about sort of moving on from sustainability. So we talk a lot about sustainability. I actually think it's a word that should be banned, but I'll discuss that in a minute. But regeneration goes further. It means designing buildings that actually give back to the ecosystem, to the communities where they are placed, and to the future generations. And this is where I will sort of say about sort of sustainability. The Brundtland definition of sustainability talks about not doing something today that will harm future generations. I just think we've just gone, we'll just not do something today and we'll not worry too much about future generations. So we need to think about circular materials, design for disassembly, passive resistance, so that we can make the built environment a healing force. This little diagram is from Kieran Malik, who is quite involved within the regenerative movement. But I think it quite clearly shows sort of the move from the left to the right of what we did conventionally when we started with the green movement, where we sort of got to with sustainability, how we move to a restorative, and then actually this idea that regenerative is much further down the line. I still think we are sitting in that sort of where the two arrows are sort of going in opposite directions. That's sustainability. We're not making things any worse, but we're actually not making things any better. So there is still a lot of soil degradation going on, water pollution, carbon emitters, this idea of constant growth, waste, as I mentioned before, 80% of construction waste still ends up in landfill site. Disruption to society, so the loss of connections, friendship groups, supporting bonds and things like that, and the reduction in biodiversity. Whereas the green arrows talk about sort of the idea of soil improvement, so not just not damaging them, but actually improving the soil. Really thinking about water management. For any of those people on this call who I taught will know that we used to do a wonderful exercise where we used to think about what happened to a raindrop that fell onto a roof. Where did it go? Into the gutter, down the downspout. But where did it go then? Our responsibility for many people is that once it's in something else, it is not our responsibility. And my argument is actually we need to follow where that raindrop is actually going. Think about carbon capture. So thinking about reducing the amount of energy that we are using, but also reducing the demand, whether that's the demand for building space, possibly thinking about more upcycling, really thinking about community when we are designing, and about not just the human community, but actually the habitat creation for other communities, whether that's just bats, newts, insects, but actually about creating habitat creation. So I'm going to quote Bill Reid here: regenerative design is not about doing less harm, it's about creating more good. So how do we do this? So the toolkits, I've given you sort of some of the things that I think you need to be thinking about. But some of the things that we are already doing that we just need to slightly reframe so that we can think about these from the point of view of ensuring a healthy environments for people. Building with the BIM, obviously a lot of people are using that. But we need to think about how we can also integrate the wellness features within that, whether that's thinking about how we map for daylighting, airflow, user access, and how we really use the technology to ensure that we are designing spaces for everybody, and putting the data into these models even before we have started building. Thinking about performance modelling to assess and optimise, again, whether that's air quality, acoustics, thermal comfort. So often we end up with a completed building where there is an unintended consequence from something, and someone goes, well, we could have sorted that out if we'd have just thought about that a little bit further upstream. Thinking about material databases, I'm currently doing a little bit of work for the Living Futures in Europe, where we are looking at the Declare label and the Red label, looking at the materials or the ingredients that go into materials. We are, I suppose, all quite comfortable with looking on the back of a sandwich packet, or when we buy a washing machine, how bad is or what has gone into, whether that's the sandwich or what's the rating of the washing machine. Why don't we have that for the materials that we are putting into our buildings, so that we really understand what is going in there? So we can specify low toxicity, low carbon materials. And there is stuff out there, like I sort of say, the Declare labels, the BRE's Green Guide, that help us make informed choices about the embodied carbon, toxicity, life cycle and recyclability of this. Again, when we think about that idea of regenerative practice, we can't just go, it's not, we're going to put something in here and that's it, we can tick our box. We need to think about what happens to that material in 5 years, 10 years, and in 100 years' time. We need to think about the approved documents. We can see them as health-informed regulators, whether that's Part F, dealing with ventilation, Part L, energy efficiency, or M, thinking about accessibility. These all directly affect occupants' well-being. So these aren't just compliance issues, these are design opportunities where we can really make a difference. And then specification tools that allow us to be precise and reduce the risk of substitutions later on that could compromise health objectives. So these tools help us design buildings that do more than just meet the code. They're there to decide to support life. But beyond that, we also need to think about our mindset. We need to ask the right questions early. And we need to ask better questions, not just does it meet regs? It should be, is this healthy, inclusive and regenerative? We need to bring empathy into technical decisions that we are making, whether that's a door threshold that allows wheelchair access or the acoustic dampening that calms a neurodivergent occupant. We make technical choices that can feel human. We work in systems and we need to focus on that. The roof build-up that affects indoor temperature, which affects sleep quality. The placement of a window, which influences light levels, which could affect mood and cognitive sharpness. Every junction matters. And crucially, as we are connectors, we speak the language of design, construction, regulations, and user needs, and bridge idealism and execution. That is our superpower. We're not just applying standards, we're shaping futures. And those futures should be healthy, resilient, and kind to the people that inhabit them. So we just go back to the idea of that lens that I've asked you to sort of think about all these things. When we think about the people that we're designing for, we need to design for health, comfort, and dignity. When we think about place, we need to respond to the local context, culture, and climate. And when we think about the planet, we need to reduce the harm, build for longevity, and to regenerate. And when these elements align, architectural technology can become a real force for good. The importance of the window. Window positioning and window design has become a real thing for the stuff that I'm talking about at the moment. We did a small project for a hospice not so long ago, and they wanted to ensure that every patient who was receiving palliative care in the hospice could either see the ground, the green grass, or the blue sky. At the end of the day, the nurses and the people who manage those spaces knew how to look after people much better than we did as the architectural technologists. So our role was actually really thinking about the importance of the window, the position of the windowsill, the window opening, the ability to open those, and that's led to a huge conversation I'm having at the moment around sort of windows. Like sort of say, position of the windows, thinking about sort of where they are, but also then thinking about openings and how they open. I have two examples in my own home of windows with top lights that are supposed to open, where because of various decisions, in front of one is a bath. So in a moist, damp environment, when I want to open the window, I literally have to stand in the bath to open the window. And in the kitchen unit goes in front of the window. And again, the moment I start cooking and I want to open the window, I can't. Take this back onto the next one. I have elderly parents, and the window handle is so difficult for their aging hands to open. It means that they're not opening their windows. And we just need to think better about how we design and who we are designing for, and how those people use those spaces, not just now, but like I sort of say, in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time. So last few slides. I hope you've learned a thing or two. And if anyone wants to continue this conversation or has any questions, and I hope there will be some, but wants to continue this conversation sort of after this, there are my LinkedIn details and information about sort of the website and where you can find me on Instagram and on Blue Sky. And thank you very much. And do you have any questions?
Thank you so much, Anne. Obviously, if you guys turn your microphones on and ask questions, therein lies madness. So please write on the chat if you have any questions. Thank you so much for that. So yeah, please get going in the chat, guys. We'll just wait a few minutes for your questions to come in. Don't be shy.
I'm just reading that some people were having difficulty seeing my slide. I will share those with everyone. I don't know why that was. They were fine here. I'm really sorry.
I think it might have
about
just
that.
been internet connectivity issues. Just that sometimes happens. It goes a bit blurry and then kind of comes back into focus when there's some internet issues. So I think it was just that it was a massive meeting. So we've got a question from Richard Holman here, who says, do you have any recommended reading?
Oh, do you know what, Richard? So if I was in my study at home, I would be gathering a whole heap of books, but unfortunately I'm not. There is Ben Cannon's book, Happy by Design, is a fabulous book to read with some really interesting little diagrams in there. There is a really good book written by, and I'm just searching for it on my phone, called it's called Healthy Buildings, written by Joseph Allen. He is a professor at Harvard University, and he's written the book is absolutely amazing in terms of very science-based, very factual. He focuses a lot. He also starts to have a conversation around sort of the economics around it as well. So how you could start thinking about explaining why this is important in a much more monetary point to your clients and developers. There is also a book called Places of the Heart by Colin Ellard, which is a really good book. But the one I've really enjoyed reading recently was Good Nature by Kathy Willis. Now, she was the head gardener at Kew Gardens, and she talks about the importance of nature and its impact on our health and well-being as well.
Fantastic, brilliant. We've got a question here from Armin, who says that recently in a new build property, the designer put openable door windows on the main elevations and was a bit confused as that doesn't really look safe, and there should be massive cold bridging there. Do you know why that would have been, maybe?
No. I'd have to have a look at the sort of, what was going on there a little bit more. But there is this constant balance, and that's what I was sort of talking about in terms of thinking about people, place, and planet, where we have to hold things in tension, whether that's about sort of ventilation and safety, whether that's safety from people trying to get into the house, people trying to get out of the house. There's a constant tension between opening windows and the loss of heat. So I'm actually in Germany at the moment, which is possibly why the slides were a bit blurry. But they have a wonderful concept called Luftung. And the idea is that sort of 15 minutes before you go to bed, you go into your bedroom and you open your windows for about 5 to 10 minutes. That 5 to 10 minutes is enough to get a really good exchange of fresh air into the building without you losing the heat, because actually the heat sits in the fabric and things like that. So you don't then lose the heat of the building. And we just don't do that. We don't even have a word for that idea in the.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I just changed some settings to stop the presentation, and it seems to have muted you. My bad. There you go. You're back. Sorry, do finish that sentence. You're back. Yeah, sorry about that.
So yes, this idea that we do need to open the window. So that sort of the last few slides about sort of windows, but also then the slide where we talked about sort of designing for our senses and thinking about our nose. During COVID, we all started realizing that we need to sort of use all our senses. So smelly 16-year-old boys' bedrooms and things like that. We need to use our nose to decide to open our windows. There's been some research where they were looking to see could they actually sort of have windows that were opening and closing, sort of looking at sort of the various smells that were happening within those spaces. So it was more automated. But there is also then that idea of sort of just agency of us being better at using the buildings that we have. And again, I think possibly that should have been my 6th point, that we actually need to educate our clients and the building users in how they should use their buildings. If there is a lot of moisture, yes, open the window. You're not going to lose a lot of heat. Open the bathroom window, close the door. Thinking about sort of how we open doors and windows, how we heat a building, thinking about the things that we are putting in a building so that we can make informed design choices. There's a lot of research now about sort of candles, and that they are now not traditional wax candles, they are petroleum-based candles. We have warning signs all over a petrol station, yet we are quite happy to bring a smelly scented candle into our beautifully sealed house. So I think we need to think about how we teach building users, facilities managers, but also building users, and how they use the buildings that we've designed.
Fantastic. And thanks for that. And thank you for that visceral image of 16-year-old bedrooms and their smell. Really takes me back. We've got a question here from Michael McBride, and I think we might have time for just one more question after this. So if anyone does have any questions, please do get them on the chat. So Michael asks, natural materials always seem to attract a premium price, and it's hard to get them included. Do you think there needs to be more done by government to reduce price of natural materials and possibly even increase the cost of nasty materials?
That sounds like a fabulous idea, doesn't it? Yes, absolutely. I mean, we do, and whether that's done through sort of a carrot way, sort of to incentivize that, and I'm thinking sort of governments and where VAT is placed and isn't placed and things like that, but also a sort of a stick bit. But it's also again about sort of education. It's probably not all about education. That if we think about sort of those conversations at a much earlier stage, and I'm not just talking about educating people to become architectural technologists, I'm talking about educating people to become better clients in the first place, so that they're coming forward because they understand the impact, the advantages, the disadvantages of using those. And whether that's then a joiner who is more comfortable with using those kinds of materials, or a client who is happy to build out of those, and insurance companies who are better, who are more comfortable about insuring those and things like that. I mean, it is absolutely huge. But when you look at sort of in France, they seem to be sort of moving forwards with a lot more natural materials. A lot of that is done through sort of policy. So what happens on a roof, what a building is made out of. I was looking, there's a database of straw-baled buildings. We seem to be doing quite well around Leeds for some reason, but then sort of Holland and Belgium, masses of them. I think also the way that we pay for our homes has a big issue. On the continent, they tend to rent, so they don't have the mortgage issue. The responsibility of that sits with someone else and not the end user. So there's a lot to go on out there on that one, yeah.
So one question from Adele, just very quickly, actually, because we are kind of running out of time. But how would you suggest getting more developers to buy into building healthier buildings and developments? As ATs, we often have limited influence when QSs look at the numbers.
Thanks, Adele. But again, I think this goes back to sort of a lot to do with sort of our education piece, so understanding sort of the advantage, and well, I think there's a bit about sort of research. We need to explain to people why this needs to happen. There's a wonderful book called by Virginia Cinquecento, which was talking about how you communicate sustainable ideas to individuals. So I think there's a communications piece sort of around that. Like I say, I think there's a lot about sort of education, whether that's sort of in secondary schools or in degree programs, because not all ATs stay as ATs. A lot of them move sort of across into different areas. There could be conversations around that. I think the cost thing, maybe we need to educate the quantity surveyors a little bit better so that they understand the advantages and disadvantages. But yeah, it's a huge piece. I'm not denying that this is you know, it's a huge bit of work that needs to happen. But like, if we go back to sort of one of the first slides where it's something like £1.4 million is spent by the NHS on our health and well-being that is directly as a result of the built environment. If we solve that problem, then that could be some way to sort of start addressing the question that Adele has brought forward.
Perfect. All right, that is all we have time for, everyone. So I think if you'd like to join me in thanking Anne for her time, thank you so much for that brilliant presentation. And yes, the PDF of the slides shall be with you all. So we have Honorary Hustings next Thursday at 6 o'clock. So please do join us for that. You can book on the website, and also keep an eye on Eventbrite for more CPD just like this one. Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have great afternoons.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.